I'm standing between you and lunch, so we'll try and keep things moving. The great thing about working for a large organisation, and Dimension Data these days is quite large. So in Australia we're about 3,000 people, we turn over about 1.2 billion. So it's quite a large organisation. Is you end up with a big team in global marketing. So the term activity-based working wasn't good enough. So the term they came up with is Workspaces for tomorrow, which always reminds me of something in a Toy Story that they should be saying. What I want to do is talk to you about some of the technology issues that drive a lot of what we're seeing around activity-based working, Workspaces tomorrow at the moment. There are, and I'll just do the slide, 5 areas that we look at that have had a big influence on what people are doing with their office space today. The first one is the cost of real estate and occupancy, and we'll go into that in a little bit of depth. The next one is the move from a single homogeneous environment, something called Windows, to a heterogeneous environment we have today, where if we went through this room, I guarantee we're probably somewhere around the average of 3.2 devices, and I can just about guarantee they're not all running Windows. So you'll be running iOS, you'll be running Android, but increasingly in a workplace, we've gone from one environment we have to worry about to 3, 4, or even 5. We also have an increasing push for a sustainable workplace. We're seeing a lot of organisations today where CEOs, CIOs have a target around carbon footprint reduction and so forth. So we're seeing a very big push around just the environment and reducing the footprint. There is also changing workplace cultures and the way that we collaborate together. So if I go back into the dim dark past of when I started work as a young chartered accountant in about 1977, the concept of collaboration was internal mail, and it never ceased to amaze me that you put a piece of paper in an envelope and it took 3 days to get to the guy next to you. And that was how you collaborated. Today, when we look at the way we collaborate, whether it's the person with you, the person across the floor from you, or a person on the other side of the planet, the richness of document sharing, of video, of voice just didn't exist in that time. So that technology has changed the way that we collaborate together. And lastly, there's a new generation of workers upon us. And if we look backwards to 2007, there was probably a seminal event in terms of the mobility market, and that was the introduction of the iPhone. Now, we are closer to 2020 than we are to the release of the iPhone. So there's going to be a whole lot of kids entering the workforce over the next number of years that have grown up with that mobile technology from a very early age. And Steve was talking about learning things from university. I have a 19-year-old that's currently attending university. I use the term attending lightly because he seems to be attending from next to his Xbox with the lecture running on his laptop beside him. But the concept of actually going there seems to be something that's passé these days. Flexible working at its best. So what I want to do is just briefly talk about, and I think Steve's covered some of this, some of the things we're seeing today in terms of behaviour, the environment, meetings and collaboration. A lot of what we have today comes out of what I'll call the 90s and the concept of what we're doing then. And it was really driven by the fact that the PC came onto the scene. And suddenly we needed somewhere for the PC to be located and somewhere for us to sit. So the concept of the cubicle was born. And really that was about somewhere that the big screen went. Well, when I say big screen, it was a very large monitor with a small screen. We're probably all familiar with those, and a rather large PC. But we were stuck there because it needed power and it needed a network cable, and you weren't going to be carrying it around. So we had an office environment that was based on that, and a lot of what we did was driven by using that technology, because what it gave us was an increase in productivity that we wouldn't have got otherwise. So we adopted that and offices came to there. Now, I talked about real estate costs. The reason that activity-based working in Australia has taken off, and one of the major reasons we see, is Australia has 4 of the top 15 in the world in terms of commercial real estate cost. 4 cities. So Melbourne, Sydney, Perth and Brisbane. Adelaide, I think, know where Adelaide is, it's probably somewhere in the top 25. That's quite astounding. Today, for most organisations, real estate is their second biggest cost after salaries. So we see people moving to activity-based working to reduce their floor space, but at the same time create a better environment. And we're seeing savings of around 30% in floor space. And what I'm very pleased about is people tend to be using that saving to do a technology refresh to enable that. So this is probably at the moment the biggest technology refresh refresh we've seen since the PC really started to be taken up in the mid-1990s. But we're seeing a huge change in the way that people are doing things today. By the way, if you're looking at where the activity-based working hotspots are in the world, I can guarantee you it's not somewhere like Detroit. So anywhere where real estate is incredibly cheap, there's not the need to do this. Where it's expensive, you'll find it happening quite a bit. We're also seeing, as I said, a move from a homogeneous environment to a heterogeneous environment. But more importantly, if we go back to that 1990s environment, the PC was at the forefront, at the centre of the world for everyone. It was a very expensive asset. You know, we can all remember that we had a PC at work you could never afford to have at home. And we used to share PCs because they were expensive. So we had a little shrine in the cubicle towards them. Today, if we talk about things like bring your own device was a simple reaction to the fact that by about 2007, people had better technology at home than they had in the office. So they got frustrated and said, I'm going to bring my stuff because this stuff's really old and really clunky. Hence BYOD was born. Now we don't see BYOD being a big factor today because people have woken up to the fact that you've got to allow people to choose the best devices out there. And once you do that, BYOD ceases to be much of an issue because somewhat unsurprisingly, if someone offers you the device you want to use, you prefer that to actually putting your hand in your pocket and paying for it yourself. The change we've seen is quite important, and it's really about user-centric computing, which is where we are today. So today, from an IT perspective, it's the user at the centre, not the device. So the devices, the data, the applications all revolve around the user. The user is at the centre. And that's a very, very important change that's happened over the last few years. We've also got changing workforce dynamics, and I think this is the first time we've seen 5 generations in the workforce. And we've got everything from the traditionalist, and I'll count my older brother as a traditionalist, he's now retired. And for a long time he had the fantastic way of responding to email by having his PA printed out, and he'd write a response and she'd respond. It was always used to be interesting conversations with him. To the baby boomers, to the Gen X, Gen Ys, and now the net generations coming through. And all of them work very, very, very differently. And one of the challenges, and Steve again touched on it, is how, as an organisation today, you attract that next generation of workers, how you attract and keep them. And that's something that people are really struggling with because my generation of career was 10, 20 years at one place. I have people working for me today that 10 or 20 months would be something I'd be really happy about if I could keep them that long. Their desire to move around, their desire to change is completely different. And when you probably take 12 months to get people up to speed and get a really great return on them, losing them at that time can be quite expensive. This is a slide, whoop, I'll go back, I clicked too quickly. This is a slide I stole, and it's there for amusement value more than anything else. I was presenting in the US and the guy after me had this slide and I came up to him and said, I've got to get that. So this is the great divide, and this is the difference between how the millennials see themselves and how HR directors in the US saw millennials. So what's really amusing is just the same group of people and the 2 different views of how they operate. I suppose my favourite one is that hard-working, 86% of millennials think they're hard-working, 11% of HR people saw that, and of course there was loyal to employers, 82% to 1%. So again, there's just a completely different mindset in the millennials around how they operate, and it's not something that the existing people in the workforce can come to terms with in a lot of cases. They are different, they do think differently. The one that, from my point of view, which is interesting, is tech savvy, where 35% of millennials saw themselves as tech savvy, yet 86% of HR people saw them as tech savvy. Because for them, that technology savvy is just part of what they do. It's not something different. It's not something they've learned. It is just part of what they are. So they don't see themselves as savvy at all, yet we do. And so what does the workplace of tomorrow look like? And we've already seen a lot of these today. I mean, we've got Gavin up later on to talk about what PwC are doing. And I started life as a chartered accountant, and one thing I've worked out pretty quickly is when the professional services people start doing things and moving in a direction, there's probably some savings or money involved somehow. No offence to PwC, but you wouldn't see PwC, KPMG and those guys changing their office environments unless there was savings and a better environment to be had. Don't spend money when there's no reason. So what we'll see in terms of behaviour is quite different. For a start, we'll see full mobility. The environments we're creating today are totally wireless, or very much, or almost totally wireless. I was talking earlier about one of the banks and the work we did with them in a new building, which is ABW in Melbourne. And we worked with them at the design stage. They're big 4 plates, and they said, everything's going to be wireless, off you go. So we sat down, worked it all out, put 250 wireless access points in that building, which is an enormous number. 18 months later, there are 880. So as I tell people today, no matter how much wireless you've got, it will not be enough. Because what we've got happening today is multiple devices, people doing video, lots of video, lots of voice, and all across that wireless network. So, and again, we're using wireless for different things. The new Children's Hospital in Melbourne, again, we've got nearly 900 access points, wireless access points in that hospital. Everything's RFID tagged. So they don't run around saying, has anyone seen the machine that goes ping? They actually know where it is. They don't have to page doctors, they know where they are because of where their cell phone is. So things like that, when you look at wireless, it's not just access, it's what you can layer on top of it as additional services. In terms of the environment, there's a combination. We're seeing a lot of shared space, a lot more meeting rooms, a lot less individual space. And if we look at the biggest demand at the moment is for small meeting rooms and the collaboration technology within that. So virtually every meeting room today will have a large screen. It will be able to do video, it will be able to do video conferencing. All of that stuff comes as standard today. It is not, well, there is the video conferencing room. Every room will do video conferencing and it will be high def. In terms of meetings, meetings are interesting things, and there's a lot of different ways that you can book meetings and book rooms and so forth. One of the big things we've seen around activity-based working is room booking systems and how you actually reserve a room and how that reservation system might in fact be talking to the building management system. So it'll kill the power to the room if there's not a meeting booked. It might even turn off the aircon up to that it has to be going on. You can even get really clever now where some of the new buildings, what we're seeing is people using LED lighting and they're powering that lighting over Ethernet, and that gives them control over every individual globe and it enables them to do some really clever stuff. So you can be looking for a desk, an office, and you just look for the red LED above that desk. If you're working back late at night, the whole floor is not lit up, you can have a pool of light around them and through to the front door. You can do all sorts of clever things. The other thing is it uses dramatically less power than traditional lighting, so there's enormous cost savings. And collaboration is probably the last area, and that's where we've seen the most change, and that's where people are moving things around today. The concept of the desk phone is probably going the way of the dodo and not before time. The fact that when you think about activity-based working or you think about workspaces for tomorrow, you are internally mobile. The environment you create will make you mobile where you are in the building, outside of the building, in your home, or whatever. It's the same core set of technologies. So the concept of having a telephone with a handset and having to cart that around or log into it is gone. What we'll see is people using effectively soft phones, whether it's people like Westpac saying that there is no phone on a desk anymore, we will give everyone a smartphone, and that is effectively their desk phone as well, or whether you're using your PC and a soft phone on your PC. So for me, I use Microsoft Link wherever I go. Link goes with me. If I'm in the US working, someone rings me, they don't know where I am, but it rings, headset's on, away you go. If I want to upgrade to video, click, and off you go again. So that sort of collaboration changes. The ability to share documents. Again, one of the things we did with one of the major banks is they have about 39,000 users on Link, and we support that environment for them. And we turned on video to the branches, and I don't think there's been a more nervous guy on the planet than me when that happened, because I'm thinking everyone's going to want to talk to their mate in another branch, and that's going to kill the banking network. So there's a bit of concern. Used a little bit of video, but what went berserk was document sharing. The document sharing numbers went exponential, because suddenly what they could do is, rather than taking that line document, getting a copy of it, putting it in an envelope, sending it off to another building where someone would look at it and then make notes and send it back, and then you'd write it up, or emailing it. You could get the document up in front of the pair of you. They might be in Sydney, you might be in Melbourne, Adelaide, wherever, and work on that document at the same time. So the responsiveness, the time to finish that was much quicker than it had been in the past. And that's it for me, and now we can have lunch. Thank you very much.